do with that 2-cent wealth tax? 2 cents on the top 1/10 of 1% in this country, and we can provide universal child care for every baby in this country ages 0 to 5. That is transformative. We can provide universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. We can stop exploiting the women, largely black and brown women, who do this work, and we can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in America. We can put $800 billion new federal dollars into all of our public schools. We can make college tuition free for every kid. We can put $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities, and we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the folks who've got it. 2-cent wealth tax, and we can invest in an entire generation's future.
Okay, can we just acknowledge for 1 second that Cory Booker keeps like shaking his head almost in disgust as she's saying things that make sense, like, hey, childcare for children, some support for parents. Like, are you against those things? My guess is he doesn't want to say that he's against them, but he appears like he's against them because he's like angrily shaking his head while she's proposing a wealth tax. So let's comment on what she had to say, and then I want to give you his response to her.
Yeah, the weird thing, he would say, I'm all for those goals, but the way that you want to get to it is unworkable. That is his talking point.
Right.
But his reaction doesn't sell that. It sells, oh, now you're talking about the kids and student loan debt. Okay, fine, we're gonna do that. It makes him seem like he's opposed to all these goals when he wants to make the point that it's just a procedural thing to him.
This is the hard part. You have to toe the lines. You have to say, you have to go with the progressive points of what you want to do. Yeah, sure, we can do the childcare stuff, which again he got to, but then you can't let your donors know that you're willing to make them
pay more,
contribute to society.
To pay their fair
which
share.
Which honestly all it is. Everyone else is contributing to society, but then these folks not. So before she even finishes answering, because we saw billionaires cry. We saw billionaires say they're afraid of her. So as billionaires are watching her lay down the law, then he has to go,
yeah, I'm not.
Not me.
Before I get to answer, you guys look at me. No, yeah. I don't agree with this right at all. You have to give the signal.
And I belong to the group of the women who get paid the least. Today is the day that they commemorate Latina, the day that we fight for Latina equal pay, which Kamala actually made mention of, outside of anybody else. But it's just this whole, and I had a conversation with my son about this the other day. He was like, we have this reverence for billionaires as if they have outworked everybody else when so many of them have just were born into that. And he said, and we have to dismantle that, and we have to unpack that and break it down, Mom. He was like, because the reality of it is that we all have 24 hours in a day, and unfairly, most of us have to work way harder than those people who just go to sleep and inherit this money. And we have to stop revering them. They are just people. And this whole idea that we're trying to take away from people who have built their wealth on the backs of people who look like me and darker and Jayar, and we have continued to ignore that they have inherited off of the backs of the slaves in this country and the people who come here to work really hard. And this reverence of them, and to see a black man standing on the stage and fighting for that is so disturbing to someone like me, because as he talks about his 2 parents that went to HBCUs and his proudness of being a black man, then how you have a little bit of reverence for your ancestors whose backs were the ones that were lashed so that these billionaires could have this wealth, and you are not even trying to take it away from them. You're just trying to say you should pay more because you make more and you got more based off of us.
But is it really fair to tax them 2 cents for every dollar they make over $50 million? I mean, is that fair?
Yeah.
So Cory Booker is about to argue that it's not fair. Let's take a look.
Again, I agree with the need to do all of those things. We're all united in wanting to see universal preschool, and I'll fight for that. We're all united in wanting to fund HBCUs. Heck, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for 2 parents that went to HBCUs. But the tax, the way we're putting it forward right now, the wealth tax, I'm sorry, it's cumbersome. It's been tried by other nations. It's hard to evaluate. We can get the same amount of revenue through just taxation. But again, we as Democrats have got to start talking not just about how we tax from a stage, but how we grow wealth in this country amongst those disadvantaged communities that are not seeing it. Look at VC dollars in this country. 75% of them go to 3 metropolitan areas. There is worth in the inner city. There is value in our rural areas. If I am president of the United States, we're gonna have a fair, just taxation where millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, but dear God, we're gonna have pathways to prosperity for more Americans. We're gonna see a change in what we see right now. Small businesses, new startups are going down in this country.
Thank you,
We need
Senator.
to give
Senator
more
Warren.
new entrepreneurs
Senator Warren,
access to
briefly.
wealth.
So what Cory Booker just said is a common talking point from millionaires and billionaires, but more importantly from Republicans. And that talking point is, a wealth tax is too complicated. How do you determine the value of assets that aren't liquid, right? I don't know, how do you determine the value of people's homes? How do you determine the value of cars? How do you determine the value of anything? You determine the value of anything by doing an appraisal and figuring out what the value is.
Yeah.
So look, and by the way, Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, let's say you have an asset where you do need to determine what the value is, something of value like a piece of art. She can defer that tax for up to 5 years until that individual has enough time to figure out what the value of that asset is, and then they pay a tax on it. It's not that complicated. And guess what? If you want to know what the what system we would use in order to determine the value of these assets, it's called the IRS. They do it all the time. That's what they do.
Maybe we could fund it. At some point, we can do that.
Exactly.
And also, if your argument is, sure, I'd love to do this in a perfect world, but it's just too hard, you can't also be the guy that like 10 minutes later in the debate says, we accomplish great things when we work together. But no, wealth tax, that's way too complicated. I mean, who could possibly do that? Or you could try to be that guy if I also, after following this primary season for like 10 months, could say what his bold alternative proposal on generating that tax revenue is. What is it? Is it going back to the same corporate tax rate we had a couple of years ago? Maybe raising the top marginal tax rate 5% or something like that? That's not gonna do it. So where is your bold stand-in for a wealth tax that will generate comparable revenue and yet in your view is more actionable?
Yes, well, it sounds like talking points from the 90s.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's too cumbersome. For who?
Actually, what's amazing is if you go back and watch debates from the 90s, the country was way further to the left, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a Republican debate when you really think about it. If you go back and watch the debate between Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush on the topic of immigration, it sounds like two moderate Democrats today discussing immigration. Right. It's insane.
But when he said they need to fund the HBCUs, and when he talks of disadvantaged youths, like it's just like talking points that you heard long ago. The thing that really bothers me, it comes from this perspective of wealth and this elite perspective that those people in marginalized communities, where you as a black man belong to a marginalized group, whether you are wealthy or not, HBCUs shouldn't have to exist, right? They shouldn't have to exist because of the racial divide in this country and systemic oppression. The fact that they do and they should be funded, but I'm losing myself in the fact that the way that he was expressing what he was expressing was coming from the perspective of us versus them as opposed to all of us. We don't want to make rich elite people uncomfortable, at the expense of the people who are on the ground working daily for us all. And it just bothers me that he was like, it's too uncomfortable. Yeah. Uncomfortable for who?
And also, there were two basic moments where he attempted to stand out by differentiating himself directly with frontrunners in the race. So you had on the wealth tax with Elizabeth Warren, and then you had on marijuana and related issues involving race and criminal justice with Joe Biden. Here's the thing, that's great, and Joe Biden's terrible on those issues. So it's wonderful if you wanna cast yourself as being on his left or however you wanna say that. But if you're pitching yourself as the candidate who's gonna be a little bit better on those issues, but fundamentally is gonna go totally hands off with billionaires, that's literally the last thing we need out of a Democratic nominee. And I get that that's the pattern that has gotten nominees to be chosen in the past, but not in 2020, that is not what we need.
You know what, because candidates now are having a problem with who's in power. The rich folks have always been in power. So you suck up to the rich folks. Hey, you know what? I know the large majority of Americans actually want this and they're right about it. And maybe I agree with it. Who knows which politicians do, because you can't say so or else your career is over. So the shift that has happened in 2019 and probably in the past cycle and a half is that now we have people that are speaking out. You have Twitter, you got Instagram, you got all the social media accounts where people are speaking out and they're getting a voice, and it's collective and it's building. And then so now like, man, these nobodies have voices. How do I address them, appease them because they're voting, and also still appease these people that are still in power because they still have all the money?
Yeah.
I gotta protect their money still, but I still have to let the other people who don't have anything who are being abused by this, I gotta make sure that they somehow believe that I'm fighting for them too, and they're stuck in the middle.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.